So last week I recorded a video about planar tracking as a PSA based upon an experience I had with a flame artist who was doing planar tracking but not using the perspective grid and was unable to kind of invert the track properly to stabilize out for me to check. So that got me thinking about what they were doing and why they were seeing things differently than I was. So my method has always been to kind of use the perspective grid to kind of stabilize out my tracks, even if I'm going to use a garbage mask to do the actual tracking and not rely on the grid itself. But after talking to other flame artists and seeing some comments, I understandably got a lot of responses that people just do a planar track and invert that axis and use that as their tracking, which is totally fine because the tracking works as it should and it gives a good result. However, when you invert that on a phone screen, I'm not getting the kind of the rock solid check that I got for the perspective grid. So I stand by my video that if I'm working with someone that maybe hasn't been delivering rock solid comps to me, then the perspective grid seemed to be a very accurate way to kind of flatten the screen and kind of check the validity of a track. However, obviously there's other ways to do it, but I want to go through all the methods so you can see and correct me if you feel like I've done it a different way. But from all my tests, I'm not able to kind of flatten a phone screen or check the track on a phone screen the way that I'm expecting to when I just invert the data. And I've done it a few different ways. So I'm going to go through it again one more time. I will quickly say, just so everyone hears it, if I was tracking like this thumb, which is not a planar surface, then yes, I would probably just do a garbage mask and have it go around the thumb. And actually, I'll just do it so we can see it. And for those situations, then absolutely a garbage mask makes the most sense, especially on a surface that's not planar and not super flat. But let me just unpack this one more time. So this is the same footage I used last week, so you'll see it twice. Everything is set up the same way in that I've included the hands on a garbage mask on both the left and the right, so that way it won't be included in the tracking. And I've drawn a garbage mask for the screen itself. So I'm gonna redo this really quickly just so everybody can see the steps. The only thing I'm gonna keep are the rotos, so I don't have to redo those. So here is my experience. So I am going to track this screen. Go to the first frame. If I do a garbage mask, I can either I can drag out, I'll do it that way if you want, or I can double click. In this particular first way, we'll just double click. So now I'm gonna just draw my mask. And again, with none of these, I was too precious, but let me just make it a little bit better because I really want to understand what's going on. And I mean, I did read that it really does require the perspective grid to kind of give this true inversion, but with so many comments back, I just wanted to make sure I went through all the steps. So I have my mask. I'm going to assign this to layer 2. And we're going to switch to planar. Be on layer 2 here. I'm going to turn on perspective. I'm going to leave auto update reference off. I'm going to snap, hit F8. I'm going to exclude the media G masks. I'm going to snap again. You can see that they've been included. And we are just going to analyze forward. All right, so here's my tracking data. If I want to put in the actual artwork, I'll just drag out our artwork. I'm gonna parent it underneath, and I'm gonna hide all of our masks. And we're gonna just kind of get this into position. Turn this off. Okay, so something like this, and I can see the track itself is good. I don't have any problems with that. So if I go in here and watch this track, I think it holds up. So that's great. And I can even test that theory by feeding this actual track into my same tracking that I did using the perspective grid. So I can see that the screen and the phone line up. So that's pretty much exactly what I would expect here. What I found was, if I want to then check the kind of the track in general on the actual surface that I was tracking. So now I'm gonna hide this artwork. I'm gonna feed our source into it, which is the plate itself, and then I'm going to invert this tracking, and this should present the stabilized version of the phone. But what you see is I'm going to see some jitter here, and I don't know how to remove that, and or I don't know how to remove that easily in a way that I could present to a flame artist working remotely somewhere else that maybe isn't understanding the concept of, you know, why their tracks are sliding in the first place. So this was the whole reason why I did the perspective grid method, which gives me a little bit more of a rock solid way to check the track. So I did this with the perspective on and the skew on. I've done the same track with the perspective off and skew on, and I get the same, pretty much the same results. Well, now I'm gonna get some jitter here, and this track doesn't actually hold up very well. So I guess the point of this is that I'm confused by why I'm seeing some variation here, why the track is sliding, but yet holding up in the way that I can tell that the tracking information is good. And if I, you know, want to use this track, by all means, it is going to work for me, and I could easily use it. So I'm not questioning that the tracking is an issue. I'm really just trying to unpack the inversion of a phone screen for screen comps, because again, I just think that if you're going to do a track, if it's a flat surface, I don't know why you wouldn't use the perspective grid as kind of your anchor. Let me just turn this off. Because all the tracking is still going to be done through this garbage mask method. So there's really no harm in kind of doing it this way, lining up the surface. And that way, the added bonus is that when I drag in my surface, it's going to be on the same plane anyway, which kind of makes life a little bit easier, and I don't have to line it up in the same way that I do by making a bilinear or perspective. I mean, if my artwork was the right resolution anyway, it would certainly help. So that's kind of what I discovered through these comments. The invert just doesn't seem to be one-to-one for me as I had expected. But again, let me just reiterate that if I'm going to track something non-planar and stabilize it out, so I want to, you know, do some work on this guy's thumb. You know, this is very much a non-planar surface. I very much would do this kind of method where we're going to snap. I'm going to isolate his thumb. We're going to track this thing forward. And now we are going to invert it. I'm going to hide the garbage mask and invert. So now I have a stabilized thumb, which will allow me to, you know, do whatever I want here. Actually, just delete this sequence. And okay. And now we're going to duplicate this. And make a new input. This is our back. We'll assign media 1 to this. And turn off the invert. And there you go. So like, that's how I would use the garbage mask in the invert on most things. Again, the PSA part, just to like really hit it home, was because of the fact that I was getting back a very sloppy track from an artist that was doing some screens for me, and there was no way for them to kind of show me their stabilized version of the phone without on starting to go down a rabbit hole that made no sense. And when I had asked for them to just do the perspective grid and just invert it so I could just see the flat view, that was very confusing to them. So when we started to unpack other methods, it became clear that like I could not see a version of their phone that made it seem like the track was working. Obviously this method works, so if I'm I just want to reiterate, if I was doing something else on this phone, this stabilization inversion is going to not be a problem, and maybe it's not a problem at all for anyone else that has had a similar shot in this kind of perspective. But all I'm trying to say is that if I have a phone with a flat surface, and I want to stabilize it and invert it and then stabilize it back kind of thing, the perspective grid method seems to be the one that has been rock solid for me. Anything else maybe seems to be a little bit of hit or miss depending on the surface type or how non-planar the actual surface is. But I would strongly recommend trying to use perspective grid for these moments in doing a garbage mask method, or not doing a garbage mask method. I mean, just so I show you everything, if I want to actually use the perspective grid, I don't have to use this garbage mask at all. As most of you know, I can rely just solely on the grid itself. Let me hide all of these things, and now we will just include nothing. We will just omit the garbage mask itself. I'm going to hit analyze, and I'm going to get very much the same track I probably got with the garbage mask. So I was using this just because of comfort. If you are coming from a way where you've never really used perspective grid before and don't understand what its merits are for some simple screen comps. Again, last thing I'll just say, if you're seasoned, you've been doing this for so long that you can't remember why you would even have this conversation, just know that the tracking absolutely did work for me using just the garbage mask, and I have zero issue with that. It was really just to invert a true stabilized version of the screen without some of the other ways that I've seen other flame artists do it. Again, this was meant to be a simple way that someone could check something for me, send it back without having to like start tracking different parts of the phone and start kind of unpacking it. This was supposed to be a one click, show me your work, one click back, we're good to go. That is the point of this video. I hope that this solves some of the people's concerns or questions that came up, and I'm happy to kind of unpack it further. I love that people were commenting, and again, I only pulled the video down just because as these comments were coming in, I wanted to make sure that I had another outlet for continuing this conversation so we could talk about it a little bit further. Again, just my final takeaway is I can't get the phone to stabilize based on a garbage mask only when I am tracking the phone, something that has a flat screen. I can get a good track that I feel like works, but if without getting into some nerdy technical things, if I'm just trying to track, invert, and then check, I do not get the result that I am expecting. Thank you for watching. Love to kind of talk about this a little further, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.